$1 million for 3 months of marriage, the millionaire said, and the loss was more than money. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have one small request. Please click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss our newest videos. It only takes a second, it is completely free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more heartfelt, meaningful stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Tell us your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Sometimes, a single sentence can drag two strangers into the same silent storm. Let's return to our protagonist. The night after the charity gala, New York was still bright under the dim lights. Inside a quiet riverside bar, Elena Cruz sat alone at the counter, papers spread out before her like fallen cards. 29 years old, hands calm, eyes tired. Director of Times New Hope the orphanage that had taken her in. Today, she had spent 8 hours at the bank begging for an extra month to pay her property taxes. The answer was no. The orphanage would be foreclosed in 3 days. She closed the file and rubbed her temples. The sad jazz music sounded too slow, too hopeful for a night like hers. Across the room, Julian Ward sat at a corner table, his whiskey untouched in front of him. 35 years old, CEO of Ward Life Pharmaceuticals, a company that makes children's drugs. This week, he became the most hated man on the internet. A shaky cell phone clip captured him turning away from a crying boy at a charity event. The caption read, "The man who sells attention and gets nothing. No one cared that the moment was misunderstood. He'd spent the day with reporters at his door, investors calling for explanations, and his own board doubting him. Now, he preferred silence to rescue. When the bartender mentioned Times New Hope something in Julian's weary mind clicked. He looked up and saw her alone, clutching papers as if they were her heartbeat. He stepped forward, slowly, hesitantly. "Miss Cruz?" She turned. Her voice was cautious but polite. "Yes? You run New Hope," he said. "I'm trying," she said. "For now." Julian hesitated, then spoke bluntly, like a man who had forgotten how to speak softly. "I hear the bank is turning fast." Her face hardened. "People talk too much." "I was one of them tonight," he said, a half smile, flickering and then fading. She looked at him closely now, recognizing his face in the news. "You're the one everyone's angry about." "I guess so," he muttered. "But tonight, I'm just someone who needs help." The words hung between them strangely. Elena didn't answer. He took a deep breath, then said the words that changed both of their lives. "Is greater than $1 million for 3 months as your wife." She blinked. Once. Twice. "You're kidding." He pulled a checkbook from his jacket, crisp, sturdy, untouched. On the smooth paper, he wrote a single number, 1,000,000. His handwriting was steady, almost cold. He signed it with the precision he used for contracts worth 10 times that much, tore it off, and set it between them. The paper clanged as it fell to the counter. Elena looked down at the check, then back at him. "You have this power?" Julian's voice was calm, almost resigned. "Power, maybe. But peace, never." Her voice hardened. "You think I'd sell my name out that easily?" "No," he said, calmer now. "I think you need help. And I need someone the world can trust." Elena stared at him, anger and disbelief blending into something softer, pity, maybe. He didn't look proud or cruel. He looked tired, like a man whose soul hadn't rested. "Why me?" she asked. He looked her straight in the eyes. "Because you don't look like a liar." The air seemed thin. Somewhere behind them, a clock ticked. She could almost hear her own pulse. "You should go home," she said softly. "I'm not home," he answered. They talked for a long time. The jazz ended. The bartender turned off the lights. Elena took the file, stood up, and looked at him again, a stranger with too much money and too little faith. "I don't know how you live," she said quietly, "but there are some things you can't buy, not even with $1 million. Julian nodded slightly, almost respectfully. When she stepped out into the cool night air, the rain began to fall again, thin, steady, cleansing. Behind her, he sat in the dark bar, the envelope still unopened on the table, wondering when an offer to fix things began to feel like a confession. Elena barely slept that night. The city outside her window was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the children, 32 little lives that depended on her. She had always told them, "Don't let money decide who you are." Now those words pressed against her like a weight. If she said no, new hope would be gone. The walls that had kept her safe would crumble for others. When the morning came, a deliveryman brought a sealed envelope. Her name was written in neat handwriting, Elena Cruz. Inside was a formal contract. Ward Life letterhead. Julian Ward's signature in sharp black ink. She read it twice. The number still made her stomach twist. $1 million. 3 months as his wife. Her hands trembled as she reached for a pen. She thought of what he had said last night. "I pay with something I no longer have trust." Elena took a deep breath and wrote a new line under the printed terms. "I will not take money. You will keep New Hope standing. That will be your payment." When she looked at the words, they felt right. A small act of rebellion against everything he represented. Later that morning, Julian arrived. His usual guarded calm softened when he saw her sitting by the window, the contract on the table between them. "You read it," he said quietly. "I did," she answered. "And I added something." He scanned the page, saw her handwriting, and lifted his gaze. "You refuse the money?" "I refuse to be bought," she said simply. "You can keep the check. Just keep the home for those kids." For a moment, he looked as if the air had left him. Then he nodded slowly. "Done." They both signed. The sound of the pen on paper was soft, final. 5 rules marked the start of something neither could name. No real love. Live under one roof. Attend 3 public events together. No intrusion into private lives. After 3 months' walk away, as he closed the folder, Julian noticed a thin silver bracelet around her wrist. Small letters engraved on the inside caught the light. Hope. He said nothing, but the word stayed with him long after she turned away. The first week inside Julian's house felt like a quiet test. Elena woke early, still unsure where to stand, what to touch, how to breathe in a place so spotless it barely felt lived in. Breakfast was prepared by staff, who looked at her with polite curiosity. Julian read the newspaper at the far end of the table, eyes scanning headlines, fingers motionless on his coffee cup. "Good morning," she offered once. He nodded without looking up. "Morning." "No." The silence after that stretched thin as glass. He was precise about everything, schedules, meals, even the temperature of his tea. She was honest to a fault, untrained in this world of measured gestures. The difference showed in every small thing, how she folded her napkin, how she laughed at the wrong moment, how she used the wrong fork at dinner. On the 3rd morning, she made coffee herself. It was too strong. He drank it anyway. By the 4th day, she began joining him in the study before their scheduled media calls. He would rehearse polite lines, while she scribbled notes that sounded human instead of rehearsed. "People do not trust perfect sentences," she told him once. He glanced up from his notes. "And you do?" "I trust what sounds like breathing," she said. That was the first time he looked at her, really looked and paused. The small frictions continued. She preferred simple clothes. He insisted on elegance. She forgot to wear the jewelry his team sent. He scolded her once, then stopped mid-sentence when she said softly, "I do not know how to pretend well." Dinner that night was quiet until she spoke again. "Julian," she said, setting her fork down, "you would be fine if you stopped judging yourself so hard." He looked up sharply. For a moment, his jaw tightened. He seemed ready to defend himself, the company, the image, the reason for the act they were both trapped in. But then something shifted. His expression eased, a faint, honest smile, brief, unguarded. "Maybe," he said. The word lingered between them longer than any toast could. Elena smiled back, a little surprised at herself. The walls of the grand house felt less distant that night. He stayed at the table after she left, staring at the empty chair, wondering how a woman who barely knew him had said something that felt more true than anything he had heard in years. Outside, the city lights flickered steady, warm, alive. $1 million for 3 months as my wife," the millionaire said, and lost more than money. Sometimes the quiet decisions become the ones we remember most. Let us return to our main character. The wedding took place in a courthouse that smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. No aisle, no choir, no crowd holding their breath. 2 signatures. 2 calm voices repeating words neither of them believed in yet. A clerk snapped one photo, offered a plain smile, and wished them luck, as if luck were a small item you could hand through a window. Outside, the air was cool and bright. Julian offered his arm, formal but gentle. "Now it is official," he said. Elena gave the smallest laugh. "Officially practical." They walked to the car without speaking. It felt less like a beginning and more like a careful repair, a patch on a thin place in 2 lives. In the days that followed, a simple rhythm began to form. Not a promise, not affection spoken out loud, just the soft weight of routine. Each morning, Elena brought Julian a cup of coffee. Black, no sugar, no cream. She learned the sound of his steps on the stairs and timed the pour too when he reached the kitchen doorway. He never asked for it. She never explained. He nodded in thanks, then drank it to the last swallow. The small steam that rose between them felt like a truce. By the end of the week, the kitchen staff had stopped hovering. They watched from a distance as the 2 of them stood side by side at the counter, not touching, saying little, building a new kind of silence that did not hurt. On his desk, where documents usually stacked in clean, sharp lines, Elena placed a small lavender plant in a plain white pot. "For calm," she said, and left it there. The scent settled into the room. Sweet, gentle, steady. He worked through a long afternoon and noticed his breathing slow. He did not say a word. The next week, the small plant became a larger one in a clay pot that held more soil and more air. She saw it and smiled, then pretended she had not. They began to match each other without trying. He walked slower in the evenings. She walked slower with him. She learned that he preferred windows open, even on cool nights. He learned that she liked the living room lamp instead of the overhead light. He began to read news on paper again because screens agitated her. She began to leave a book open on the table because the look of pages calmed him. On a sunlit Sunday, Elena stood on the balcony with a bag of soil and 2 thin stakes. "Let us plant something," she said. Julian loosened his tie and rolled his sleeves, almost shy. "I am not a gardener." "You are today," she answered. They knelt on the wooden planks, fingers dark with soil, and set 2 young trees into new homes. Elena pressed the dirt with her palms and named hers in a soft voice. "Hope." Julian paused, looking at the second tree, its small leaves trembling in a friendly breeze. He cleared his throat. "Trust." They both laughed, not at the words, but at the honesty of saying them out loud. For a moment, they looked like 2 people who had decided to try. The balcony kept their secret and held their light. That evening, the power failed without warning. The house settled into a hush that felt almost holy. Elena found 2 candles in a drawer and struck a match. The flame lifted, small and brave. She set 1 candle on the coffee table and poured a little wine. The room softened. The lavender on Julian's desk gave off a fresh breath, as if the dark had made it bolder. They sat across from each other, shoes off, shoulders relaxed. Elena spoke first. "At New Hope, the children love fairy tales. Not for the princes, for the endings that hold them when the day has been hard." Julian listened, eyes on her face, and then on the candle. "I forgot the feeling," he said, his voice low. "Having someone waiting at home." "It does not take much," she answered. "Just keep the door open." Silence followed, warm and clear. The kind that lets a person hear their own heart and not be afraid of the sound. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Elena did not move. The space between them grew short and bright. She could hear his breathing. He could hear hers. A quiet pull drew them closer, slow as a tide. Almost without thought, they leaned in. The world narrowed to the soft line of a mouth, the patience of a glance, the shared air between 2 careful people. Then a thin wind slipped through the open window. The candle flame bent. A single sheet of paper lifted from Julian's desk, skimmed the air like a pale bird, and drifted down toward the coffee table. The marriage contract. The bold words at the top caught the light for a second, then settled where both could see. 3 months. No real love. They looked at it. The nearness broke. Their shoulders eased back, not in rejection, but in respect for the boundary they themselves had drawn. Elena pressed her lips together, as if she had almost spoken a truth too soon. Julian exhaled, slow and steady, as if putting a hand on the quiet to keep it from running away. She smiled, gentle and a little shaken. "We should pick that up." "Tomorrow," he said, a half-smile answering hers. The candle burned lower. The house held its breath. Outside, the two young trees stood side by side, their small leaves ticking softly in the dark, like a clock learning how to keep time. Elena lifted her glass and tasted a sip. The wine was simple. It tasted of something honest. She thought about the children and the stories she would read them tomorrow. She thought about the man in front of her and the story they had not decided to tell. Not yet. Julian watched the lavender flicker in the candlelight. He did not speak. He wanted to say thank you, but for what exactly he could not name. For the coffee. For the plant. For the two trees. For a night without lights that still glowed. When Elena stood, he stood too. They walked to the base of the stairs and paused without planning to. The distance between them was small again, but this time they did not reach across it. Some doors opened slowly. Some hearts do too. "Good night, Julian," she said. "Good night, Elena." She went up the stairs, step by careful step. He remained until the candle went out on its own. Only then did he cross the room and lift the fallen contract from the table. He did not read it. He folded it once, gently, and set it aside. In the quiet that followed, he looked through the window toward the balcony. Hope and trust stood like two small sentries against the night. He let the sight rest in him. For the first time in a long time, the dark did not feel empty. It felt full of something he did not dare to name. The first crack came on a Monday morning. Julian was in a meeting when his assistant slipped a phone onto the table. The screen glowed with headlines. CEO hires orphan girl to play his humanitarian wife. Another read, "The girl from New Hope buys a new life." Beneath the words, a photo of Elena younger, thinner, smiling shyly in front of the orphanage gates. The image spread like wildfire. Every network picked it up. The story was half true, half venom. Elena saw it at the kitchen counter, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. Her name was everywhere now, dissected, questioned, twisted into something small and ugly. She scrolled through comments until the words blurred. Gold digger, saint for sale. Pretty face, perfect scam. Each one cut a little deeper. She whispered to herself, "They can think what they want. He knows the truth." But as the hours passed, Julian said nothing. His office released no statement. His silence filled every corner of her phone. By evening, she turned off the television. The lavender by the window still bloomed, unaware of the noise outside. She sat beside it and waited. When Julian came home, the lights were off. He paused at the doorway, loosened his tie, and spoke carefully. "You saw it." "I did." Her voice was steady. "I am handling it," he said. "How?" "By not feeding it. The more we talk, the worse it gets." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "That is easy for you. You have a name to hide behind. I have nothing to lose but myself." He met her eyes. "It will fade." "It already has," she said quietly. "Whatever we built, it faded the moment you stayed quiet." The words landed like the sound of something breaking. He didn't argue. Maybe because she was right. Maybe because every part of him was already too tired to defend anything. He turned away first, walking to the window. "There are 10 days left on the contract," he said. "After that, you are free. Let it pass." "Free," she repeated. The word felt like a lie. The house went still. The air between them no longer carried warmth, only the soft hum of something ending. That night, Elena packed her small suitcase, the same one she had arrived with. On the dresser sat the silver bracelet engraved Hope. She traced the letters with her thumb. In the mirror, her reflection looked calmer than she felt. She wrote a note on the back of an old envelope and left it on the table beside the bracelet. "This was my last performance." When Julian came downstairs later, the house was quiet again. Her cup sat where she had left it, half full, cold. He noticed the missing suitcase first, then the bracelet. He picked it up gently, as if it were something fragile enough to shatter with breath alone. The note lay beside it. He read the line once, then again. The words blurred for a second before his eyes cleared. Outside, The two small trees on the balcony swayed in the wind. Hope bent first. Trust followed. He stood there a long time, the bracelet in his hand, realizing that silence meant to protect her had cost her faith instead. Somewhere down the street, a taxi light disappeared into the night, and with it went the only person who had seen the man behind his name. The house was quieter than ever after she left. Days passed, but her absence did not fade. It multiplied. Julian still went to work, still attended meetings, still spoke in that measured voice people trusted. But every sentence felt hollow. He had done what the contract required, kept New Hope alive, protected the children, protected her name on paper, yet the cost of that silence weighed heavier than any scandal. Sometimes, when the city dimmed into evening, he found himself parked across from the small street where she now lived. He never got out of the car. He only watched her silhouette through the window, the gentle rhythm of her hand turning pages, the soft bend of her head. Once, she laughed at something on the television, and that sound, even faint and distant, broke him a little more. He told himself it was better this way, that she was safe, that what they had was never meant to last. But truth is quieter than pride, and it does not stop asking to be heard. A week later, Julian walked into the boardroom at Ward Life. Cameras, lights, reporters, a full press conference called without warning. His assistant tried to stop him, but he had already made up his mind. The headlines from before still lingered. The charity marriage, the orphan bride, the man who bought love. He stood behind the microphone, eyes scanning the sea of faces, then spoke. "I asked a good woman to stand beside me for 3 months," he began. "It was supposed to fix a mistake, not hers, mine." The room stilled. Pens froze. "I made it look like an arrangement, like money could build trust. But the truth is, she never took a dollar from me. She asked for one thing only, that New Hope stay alive. And I kept that promise because she reminded me of what it means to keep any promise at all." A reporter interrupted. "So you admit the marriage was a deal?" Julian nodded. "It was. But she turned it into something real long before I understood it." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "She is not a symbol. She is not a story to sell. She is the kindest person I have ever met, and I owe her more than I can ever repay." A light from a camera flickered in his eyes. "If you are looking for fault," he said, "put it on me. I was the one who thought money could buy silence. And I was wrong." For a moment, the room was silent. Then flashes began, questions shouted, hands raised, but Julian had already stepped away from the microphone. He walked past the noise, out into the sunlight, breathing as if for the first time in months. Across town, inside the office of New Hope, Elena sat at her desk surrounded by open boxes of donated clothes. The television played softly in the background. She hadn't planned to watch, but his voice made her look up. She saw him on the screen, no defense, no corporate mask, just him. When he said her name, her hands stilled. When he said, "She never took a dollar from me," her eyes filled before she could stop them. For the first time since leaving him, she believed not what he said, but how he said it. There was no performance left in that man. The children nearby didn't notice her tears. They were laughing over a puzzle, shouting pieces and colors. Elena smiled through the blur, whispering under her breath, "Thank you, Julian." Outside, the afternoon light spread over the orphanage, warm, steady, forgiving, as if even the city itself had decided to exhale. Rain fell soft and endless, the kind that hushes the city instead of washing it away. Julian stood by the tall window of his apartment, staring out at the silver blur of lights. The headlines were gone, the noise had moved on, but quiet had never felt so loud. He had done what was right. He had kept his word, saved New Hope, spoken the truth in front of the world. Yet the house still felt hollow without her voice in it. Every morning he reached for the second cup on the counter before remembering she was gone. A knock came through the sound of rain. Light, hesitant, real. He turned. For a moment, his breath stopped. When he opened the door, she was there, Elena. Her hair was damp, her coat dark with rain, but her eyes were clear. "I came to say thank you," she said. He stared, unable to find words. "You do not have to." "I know," she answered gently. "But I wanted to." She stepped inside. The scent of lavender followed her in faint, almost imagined. He had missed that smell more than he could admit. I saw the press conference, she said. You did not have to defend me. Yes, I did, he replied quietly. It was the only honest thing I have done since you left. Her smile was small, steady. You are learning then. Ugh. He tried to laugh, but only managed to sigh. Still not fast enough. Elena walked toward the balcony doors. Outside, the two small trees stood in the rain, the ones they had planted together months ago. Their thin trunks had grown straight and strong. They survived, she said softly. Barely, Julian murmured. I overwatered them at first. I thought care meant control. She looked at him with that same calm that had always disarmed him. You do not need me to keep them alive. You do not need me to fix you. You just need to stop using guilt as a compass. He swallowed hard. I hurt you, he said. I thought silence would protect you. It only built walls. You hurt me, she admitted. But not because you wanted to. Because you were afraid of feeling something you could not manage. Her voice was gentle, without accusation. It undid him more than anger ever could. They stood there a long while, the rain against the windows, a slow rhythm of memory. Finally, she turned to leave. You do not need me to redeem yourself, Julian. You just need to be kind without expecting it to save you. He nodded, his throat tight. And you? Will you be all right? She smiled, soft and certain. I already am. At the door, she hesitated. Take care of the trees, she said. I will. When she stepped into the rain, she didn't look back. He watched her disappear into the night until only the sound of the storm remained. Julian stayed at the door, his reflection faint in the glass. He whispered to no one, "Thank you for teaching me what love costs." In the days that followed, he returned to work, but something inside him had shifted. The quiet no longer hurt the same way. It carried her voice steady, patient, forgiving. Sometimes he would catch himself, glancing at the balcony. Hope and trust grew taller each week, green against the gray city. And somewhere across town, Elena read to the children at New Hope. Her voice rose and fell like rain against old windows. She had thought peace meant forgetting, but it didn't. Every time she said his name in her mind, her heart stuttered. Just a little the same uneven rhythm she'd felt that night, when the lights went out, and their faces were close enough to blur the line between pretending and truth. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Some things do not end. They wait until we are ready." The courtroom was lit by the morning light, quiet and decisive. Julian stood before the panel, papers neatly arranged. His voice was even as he spoke. I will transfer all of my ownership of the shares to the community trust, with one small condition: that New Hope be renovated and expanded, so that New Hope can care for more than 32 children, he said. Ward Life will continue to operate under public direction. It should belong to the people it serves, not to me. There was a murmur. Some tried to stop him, remind him of what he was giving up, but Julian just smiled. I'm tired of holding on to something that was never mine. The judge nodded, the gavel fell, and just like that, years of power, gone with a single choice. And yet he had never felt more relieved. As he stepped outside, the sunlight hit his face. The noise of the city rose in waves, then a softer sound. Children's voices. Across the yard, a small group waited behind a rope fence. Children from New Hope. They held cardboard signs painted with uneven letters. Thank you, Mr. Ward. From New Hope. Asterisk. The youngest girl waved a sprig of lavender. Another boy shouted, You did it! Julian's throat tightened. He raised his hand in response, speechless. The world around him blurred until only the children were visible. Their laughter, their small hands, the light on their faces, everything he had ever thought he could quantify was now right before his eyes. He reached into his pocket and found the silver bracelet. Asterisk, Hope. Asterisk. He closed his fingers around it. You taught me to believe, he whispered. Asterisk. You taught me how to trust again. Asterisk. For a moment, he thought of Elena, her voice, her quiet courage, the way she turned his shame into something human. The children ran forward as the guards let them through. They surrounded him, their laughter echoing through the air. Julian laughed too, a booming sound, clear and true. And for the first time, he felt what unconditional love really meant. 1 month later, sunlight poured through the open windows of New Hope's new home. The air smelled of fresh paint and lavender. Children ran barefoot across the courtyard, their laughter bouncing off the clean walls like music. Elena stood at the podium with a list in her hands, calling the names of each child who had found a family. Her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from gratitude too large for words. When the last name left her lips, applause filled the yard. She looked out across the small crowd, donors, volunteers, and familiar faces. Then she saw him. Julian. He stood at the back, quiet, hands in his pockets, watching her with the kind of calm that only comes after a long storm. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time folded in on itself: the bar, the contract, the long nights, the silence, the press, the apology, everything that had brought them here. He began to walk forward. The crowd parted slightly as he stepped into the open space at the center of the courtyard. Then, to everyone's surprise, he went down on one knee. His voice was low, but it carried. "There is no contract anymore," he said. "No conditions. No time limits. If you will let me, I want to take your name." Elena's breath caught, then turned into a half-laugh, half-tear. "You cannot buy me, Julian." He smiled, that quiet, familiar smile. "I know." "I will." From his jacket, he pulled a single folded paper, the old contract, now patched with clear tape. He held it out, and she saw the new line written in his handwriting at the bottom. Clause 6. If both parties fall in love, let it be real. Her laughter broke through her tears. Around them, the children began to whisper, then cheer. The courtyard glowed golden in the late Sunday. Julian rose slowly, eyes still on her. "So," he said softly, "what do you say?" She nodded, unable to speak. The cheers erupted. "She said yes," the children shouted, their voices rising like bells. He took her into his arms, and they both laughed, the kind of laughter that sounds like forgiveness and home. Music drifted from inside a piano, simple and warm. The wind carried it through the courtyard, blending with their laughter. Sometimes love begins as a lie, but ends as the only truth left standing. If you believe love can heal what pride once broke, stay with us for more stories like this. Valen Stories, where power learns to love again. Thank you for watching.